Hi, I'm Parneet Jaggi, and in this lecture, we're going to be discussing a poem, I'm Getting Old Now, written by Robert Kroetch. Now, Robert Kroetch is actually regarded as a stalwart figure in Canadian literature, and he is known, very well known, for his innovative style and techniques in writing, and he's written experimental poems and is well known as an important poet of the 20th century. Now, knowing a little bit about him, we know him as a Canadian innovative writer born in Alberta in 1927. He got his degrees from the University of Manitoba and University of Iowa, and most of his novels are set on the prairies, the grasslands where he lived. He grew up, including his novels Words of My Roaring, The Stud Horse Man, which also won a Canadian Governor General's Award, and Gone Indian. He is also a poet and he published 14 collections of English poems. He died in a car accident in 2011. And each year, Snare Press grants the Kroetch Award for Innovative Poetry in his honor. Now, when we look at his poem, I'm Getting Old Now, as the title indicates, he is approaching his old age. It is autobiographical, it is also nostalgic, and most important, he presents his own acceptance of death. It's a simple prose poem, but with a lofty theme. He also gives an expression to his nostalgic dream about his mother. There is a logical as well as emotional link between the first part of the poem, which is the dream, and the second part, which is about death, which actually makes the poem quite interesting. So when we look at the poem, we see that he starts with a very conversational tone. He says, I'm getting old now. I can tell I dream a lot of my mother's. In my dream last night, she was in the garden, over the hill. Behind our house, she was standing. I was playing in pea vines. We were both happy. Neither of us would move in the dream, perhaps. I wasn't playing. I was kneeling to pick peas. My mother held in her apron the peas. We had picked together. She was standing still. I knew she was watching me. She was watching me grow. Like a bad weed, she liked to say that pleased her. I'm getting old now. I won't say I'm happy. Serene is an adequate word. Death is not quite the enemy it was. It is a kind of watching. Death begins to seem a friend that one has almost forgotten, then remembers again. In my dream, last night, I was playing in the garden. Now, as we come to know from the flow of the poem that it is about the poet's memories about his mother, about his childhood. So he begins with the statement, I'm getting old now. I can tell. And in the dream that he saw, both the poet and his mother were in the garden behind their house. And he assumes that he is playing in the pea vines. But later he rejects this assumption and he says that he was kneeling to pick the peas. So his mother collected the peas in her apron, she says towards the end of this passage. So according to the poet, both were happy but static. He later says that his mother is standing still, watching him grow like a bad weed. And then we see a change in the tone of the poem, where he is now engaging in a philosophic rumination, contemplation about aging and death. And he says he's not happy about his agility, but he's calm, he's serene, he's peaceful. And he doesn't consider death as an enemy. Death to him is like a friend who is forgotten, but then he remembers again. Death is, although not visible, but it is an inevitable truth which he is accepting and which is always present with the living beings. So it is a kind of an essence And the present life of the poet is therefore a sign which is kind of going to be completed by death. So he concludes the poem by repeating, "In my dream last night I was playing in the garden." So here we see that the poem intertwines the notions of age, time, and death. Poet's mother, who silently watches him grow, can be regarded as a metaphor of time, which is witnessing, which is watching everything. In a sense, it was his dream about his mother that persuades him to contemplate on death and especially his old age. And in the other sense, it was also his unconscious thought about his mother which takes the form of dreams, which actually subsequently leads to these contemplations and projections. Then we have the oscillation, the movement of the poem also between the past and the present. So the time is also significant in the poem. Now, coming to the themes, as we look at the themes, it presents the poet's acceptance of death. It is simple but vibrant, and it also gives expression to his nostalgic theme. There is a logical as well as an emotional link between the dream and the last part of the poem, which is a reflection on death. Then when we talk about the style of the poem, it carries very simple language, conveys his nostalgia and his views about death. And he tries to point out very emphatically that death is not an enemy of man, so we should not be afraid of death, but embrace the reality, embrace the consciousness, and we should accept death as the natural end of life. Then we have an important metaphor coming out of, he calls himself a bad weed in the eyes of his mother. Then of course we have the pictorial imagery like the pea vines, apron, garden and the hill where he used to play and move around with his mother. So it is his childhood, his memories, his nostalgia which appears and reappears in the poems and leads him to a more serious contemplation of death. So the poem thus resembles a journey from past to present, but it also seems to strengthen the bond between him and his mother. So this was a brief analysis of the beautiful poem by Robert Kroetsch, I Am Getting Old Now. Thank you for now.